Hi friends, welcome to Azure Content. This is part 8 in Azure Data Factory playlist. In this video, we will learn about copy data activity in Azure Data Factory. So as we have already discussed in our previous videos that we have three categories of activities in ADF. The first one is data movement activity, then data transformation activity, and then control flow activities. So copy data activity belongs to data movement category, and it is the most useful activity in Azure Data Factory when we have the requirement to move the data or copy the data between two data stores. So usually in ETL process or ELT process, the first thing that we need to do is extract the data, right? So usually in a full-fledged development project, our requirement is to ingest the data from multiple data stores. It can be from an on-premise data store like on-premise SQL Server, or it can be from some cloud like SAP database, or it can be from Salesforce or REST API, or any kind of multiple data stores can be there from where you have to ingest the data into your destination data warehouse, or you might need to move your files into Azure Data Lake storage. So basically, day in and day out, you have to deal with moving the data when you're working as a data engineer. Okay. So in ADF, the best way to ingest the data is to use copy activity in your pipeline. So let's move ahead and understand few things about copy data activity. So as we understood, copy activity can be used to copy data to and from multiple data stores which can be located in your on-premise location or in Azure cloud or any other cloud. And based on the type of source and sync data store, you need to select the integration runtime on top of which copy activity will be executed. So for example, if you're copying the data between two data stores that are publicly accessible through the internet, which means that are present over the cloud, then you need to use Azure Integration Runtime, which is also called Auto Resolve Integration Runtime. Okay, so Azure Integration Runtime is also called Auto Resolve IR. We will learn deeply about Integration Runtime later in the upcoming videos. But at this point of time, you can just understand that whenever you need to copy the data between cloud data stores, then you need to use Azure Integration Runtime. And whenever we need to copy the data amongst the data stores which are located on-premise or in some private virtual network, then we need to use self-hosted integration runtime. So the question arises that where exactly we need to select integration runtime while using the copy activity in ADF. Okay, so let me go to ADF, and here let me start creating a pipeline, and let me just drag and drop copy data activity. So you can see it comes under move and transform option inside this activity panel. So let me minimize these. So you can see in the source and sync settings, we have to provide the data sets pointing to the source data store and sync data store. Okay. So let me just try to create a new data set. Suppose let me point it to Azure Data Lake Gen 2. Okay. So here we can select the file format. Let me just select any of them. And here we need to select the linked service. Okay. So whenever we create a data set, we have to select a linked service on top of which the data set will be created. Okay. So I have a linked service already. So let me open this linked service. So inside this linked service, you can see there's something called connect via integration runtime. Okay. So here is the place where you need to select the integration runtime. That is the actual engine or the compute infrastructure that will perform the copy task. So here we need to select either Auto Resolve Integration Runtime, or you can create your own SHIR or self-hosted integration runtime. Currently it is unavailable in my local system, but you can install your self-hosted integration runtime if you have your data in some on-premise location or in some private virtual network. Okay, so you can select any one of them, and you can give your credentials and everything and create the linked service. Okay. So this was just to show you that where does the integration runtime lies. It is actually inside the linked service. We have to make the selection. Okay. Let me go back. Let me discard these changes. So we can copy the data amongst any data stores that are supported in ADF. So what are the data stores that are supported? Let me go to the official documentation provided by Microsoft. And here, if I scroll down, you can see all the supported data stores and their formats. So for example, in Azure category, these are the data stores which can be used as the source and sink. Okay, so you can see for few of them, sink is not available. For few of them, source is not available. Okay, so you can see this list to make sure that copy activity can load your data from the required data store or not. You can check this list out. I'll provide the link in the description of this video. And you can see in the databases category, these are the supported data stores in ADF. Similarly, in NoSQL, these are the data stores. In file category, these are the data stores available. Similarly, lots of other options are there. In addition to the supported source and sink, you can also check this list to see for which data store which IR is supported. Okay, so you can see Azure IR and self-hosted IR. Almost for all the data stores, both are supported. For few of them, Azure Integration Runtime is not supported, but self-hosted IR is supported for all. So for example, if you want to load the data from some web table to suppose SQL table, then you need to install self-hosted integration runtime. Then only you can perform the copy activity. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation. So this slide talks about the file formats that are supported in ADF. So these are the 8 file formats that are supported in ADF. That is Avro, binary, delimited text, Excel, JSON, ORC, Parquet, and XML. So how can we check that in ADF? Let me go back to ADF. And here, if I try to create a data set, here you can see all these categories that we just talked about in the supported data stores. So for Azure category, these are the ones that are supported data stores as source. Similarly, for databases, these are the ones. Okay, since we have clicked on source dataset, so these are supported in source. Okay, so when we go to file format, so you can see these are the supported data stores related to file category. Okay, so if I open any one of them, so you can see these are the supported file formats: Avro, binary, delimited text, Excel, JSON, ORC, Parquet, and XML, which is similar to what we have in the presentation. Okay, so apart from these file systems, in Azure Cloud also we have blob storage and Gen2, where you can store the file, okay, in the same supported file formats. So we can also copy the data from one file format to another file format in the same data store as well. So for example, if I want to copy the data within ADLS, that is Azure Data Lake Storage, from CSV format to JSON format, then I can do that easily using copy data activity. And there are lots of other things that we can do using copy activity. Let me go ahead. So you can see a few examples of what can be done using copy activity. So we can copy the data from SQL Server database and we can write it to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen2 in any of the formats, for example, Parquet format. Or suppose we have a CSV file present in our on-premise file system and we want to load it into Azure Blob Storage in Avro format. So we can do that easily in copy activity. Or we can also copy zipped file from on-premise file system and we can decompress it on the fly and we can extract the file to Azure Data Lake Gen2. So we have the option to compress and decompress file in the copy activity itself. So we can use suppose gzip option and we can compress the CSV file and we can load it into Azure SQL database as well. So apart from that, we have options to perform serialization and deserialization or compression and decompression inside the copy activity itself. We can also merge multiple files from one folder and put them into a single file using copy activity. And suppose if your source is having 5 columns and in the sink you want to add an additional column that is having the data related to the current time when the pipeline is executed, then we can also do that using additional column in copy activity. We can also skip bad data or duplicate data and we can also log errors using copy activity. So these are just small examples of what can be done using copy activity. There are multiple other things that can be achieved using a simple copy activity in ADF pipeline. So we will learn most of these things practically in our upcoming videos by creating the pipeline. So in this video, let's just see a small demo of how copy activity works. So let's create a pipeline that will move our data from Azure Data Lake Storage to suppose SQL Server. Okay. And we will also see the other way around, that is from SQL Server to Azure Data Lake Storage. That also we will perform using copy activity. So let me try to create two pipelines. Okay, so first one we will be copying data from ADLS to SQL Server, and the second one we will be copying data from SQL Server to ADLS. Okay. So first of all, let me talk about this general tab. So here we need to give the name to this activity. So by default, the name is copy data 1. So we can change it according to our convenience. So suppose let me give the name as copy data from ADLS to SQL. Okay. And in the second pipeline, let me give the name as CP underscore SQL to ADLS. Okay. So in the description, you can give some details regarding what this activity does. So it copies the data from Gen 2 ADLS Gen 2 to SQL Server. Okay. So this is completely optional. As you can see, this name has this star mark, which means it is mandatory. And other than that, all these things are optional. And there are default values also assigned to these parameters. So this timeout option tells us that what is the maximum amount of time this copy activity is going to run. So earlier this timeout was 7 days. Now ADF team has reduced it to 12 hours. So if the copy activity is stuck for some reason from long time, then it will be timed out after 12 hours of execution, and it will eventually fail the pipeline. So basically it reduces the cost if the pipeline is stuck if you use this timeout option. So you can change it. Suppose I want this copy activity to run just for 30 minutes, and if it is not able to complete within 30 minutes, then I want this to be timed out. Okay, so coming to retry option. So if we specify any number here, it means that after failure of copy activity, it will make 3 more attempts to run this activity. So suppose if I'm specifying this retry option as 3, then this copy activity, after failing for the first time, it will retry 3 more times. So I'll give you an example when this can be helpful. So for example, if you have multiple tables that you are trying to copy from some data store to your SQL database, and due to overloading in the integration runtime, it might fail, saying some error like internal server error or memory optimized error or something or the other, then it might succeed in the next attempt in the retry. Or suppose if you're making a call to some REST API, and at the same time multiple other customers are also making the same call to the URL, then at one particular moment it might fail, but after giving several retries, it might pass in the second or third attempts. So this is the maximum number of attempts that it will make. If it is succeeding in the second attempt itself, then it won't make another attempt, but this is the maximum attempt that it will make after first failure. Okay. Then coming to retry intervals. So this is the number of seconds it will wait in between each retry attempts. And also we have the option to secure our input and output, which means when you run the pipeline, in the output option, when you see the pipeline execution, then your input and output data would be masked or secured by using this secure input output option. Okay. So it won't show the details in the pipeline execution. It will just mask it by giving the star symbols. So we will see that in practical later. So let me remove this for now. And in the source setting, let me create a data set that will be pointing to the Azure Data Lake Storage. So just for demo, let me select a random file. Suppose in my ADLS input container, I have a file called roles.csv. So I'm going to point my source dataset into this file, and we will load the data into a table in SQL Server. Okay. So since the data is in CSV format, so I'm going to select that. Let me select a linked service pointing to ADLS, and then I'll be pointing the file path to this file called roles.csv. So the file contains first row as header. So let me select this first row as header and let me import schema and let me click on OK. So you can see once I created the source dataset, all these options are available that is relevant to this data store. So these options that are populated depends on what kind of dataset you are using. So if I select any other dataset, suppose let me select SQL table. So you can see these options have been changed. Okay. So let me select the previous dataset that we created. So here we have multiple options that we can make use of according to our requirement. So for example, if I want to copy all the files from a particular folder, then I can make use of this wildcard file path, or we can make use of this list of files to copy only specified files in a list. Or we can use this filter by last modified to copy files that are modified from a certain range to certain range. Or we can use this recursively option to copy all the files of a specific folder. We can enable partition, or we can set the maximum number of connections to this source dataset, or we can skip a few line counts present in this file. Okay. And we can also add few additional columns to this source dataset and load to the destination. So all these options you can make use of when you point your dataset to ADLS Gen 2 or blob storage. And depending on dataset, these options will also change. So I'm leaving all these options as default. We will see few use cases in upcoming videos where we will be making use of few of the options here. And in the sync, I have to point it to the SQL database. So I already have a dataset pointing to Azure SQL table. If you don't have, you can create it using this new option and you can point it to Azure SQL database. Okay. And here you need to provide the linked service pointing to Azure SQL, where you will have all the connection related. So you can see it is pointing to auto resolve integration runtime, and all these server related details are present in the linked service. Okay. So I'm good with that. So I don't have any existing table that will store this data. So what I will do is I will use this auto create table option so that it will automatically create the table on the fly and it will load these data into that newly created table. Okay. So currently the right behavior is insert. So I'm good with that. So you can play around with all these options. If I want to update the existing records in addition to the newly inserted records, then I can use this upsert option where I need to give these key columns. So all these options are there. I'm not going deep into that. So if I run this pipeline, it will copy the data from CSV file to the table which we will specify here. So let me name this table as dbo dot roles output table. Okay. And let me run this pipeline. So let me hit on this debug option, and meanwhile let me write down the query. Select star from dbo dot roles output table. Let's go back and let's see if pipeline execution is completed. Yeah, so you can see the pipeline execution is completed. Let me go to SQL Server and let me hit on this query. Yeah, so you can see the data has been loaded, which is similar to what we have in the source dataset. And we did not had this table earlier. It created the table on the fly with the help of this auto create table option in the sync setting. Okay. So if I debug this pipeline again, then the same data would be reloaded into the table, which means it will create duplicates. Okay, so let's wait for this execution. Yeah, so the execution is completed. Let me go back and hit on execute query. So you can see same data has been loaded again since we did not truncate the table before load. So we can write a truncate table query in this precopied script that will truncate this table before the next load. So we successfully loaded the data from CSV file present in our ADLS Gen 2 to SQL table using copy activity. Okay. Similarly, what we can do is we can create another pipeline that will be copying data from Azure SQL table and load it into CSV file. Okay. So I have pointed the source dataset to my SQL table. Okay. So this time let me select another table. Suppose let me select this dbo.ct. Okay, so let me query this. So you can see we have two columns here. So let's load this data into a CSV file. Okay. So you can see we have these options. Either we can write the query here like select star from dbo.city, or we can point to the table directly by selecting the table here. Okay, so let me select city table. And other options are related to SQL database. For example, you can define the isolation level, or you can partition the table by using this physical partition of table or dynamic range. So all these options are relevant to SQL database. So I'm not going deep into that. And you can also add some additional column and load it into the sink. So I'm leaving all these options as it is. So let me go to the sink and let me create a dataset pointing to ADLS Gen 2 to store the data coming from the table. So let me create a new container called table output just for the demo purpose. And here let me give the file name as city output file .csv. Okay. So I'm going to have the first row as header and no need to import schema because it is sync. So now you can see according to the data store, these options have been changed. In our earlier pipeline, in the sync dataset, you can see all these options were relevant to SQL database. But in the sync of this pipeline, you can see these options are different. So here you can select the copy behavior. We will learn about these in upcoming videos. Okay. And we can also go to this mapping tab and we can import schema. And we can map the data between source and destination. Suppose I want area to be coming first before name, then I can do that. And if I want to improve performance of this copy activity, then I can use these options in this settings. We can change this data integration unit. We can also enable parallelism. We can also skip bad rows using this fault tolerance option. We can also log errors using this enable logging. So we have multiple options in setting as well. We will learn about these things in details in upcoming videos. For now, let me just hit on this debug and let me copy the data from this city table into the desired file. So we are expecting that the order of this column would be changed once this copy activity will be completed. Yeah, so the execution is completed. Let me go to the ADLS account and let me hit on refresh. So our output folder is table output, and here you can see the file has been created in today's date, which is called city output file.csv. Let's see the output here. Yeah, so you can see area and then name is coming as expected, as we have mapped it in the copy activity mapping option. Okay. So every time I run this pipeline, this file would be overwritten with the latest data coming from the source. Okay. So this is how we can load data using copy activity amongst multiple data stores that are supported in ADF. So we will see more use cases using this copy activity in upcoming videos. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you like the content. Please hit on like button and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you.